Cherie. Cindy, thank you for having me, and for those of you who've come to do a brown bag, thank you. I'm honored. There's a certain reality that we face every day. We know the economy is not doing well. That's not a political statement. It is a factual statement that 66% of the country's gross domestic product comes from small businesses. It is a fact that 67% of the employment in the United States comes from small businesses. So that if small businesses cannot get capital without regard to the level of their success, then you know the economy is not doing well. That's not political, it's factual. I did a little handout where the last data available was 2010, and while it was a horrible year in terms of economics and a national picture, over $205 billion still got funded for small businesses, whether they actually were current and in business, or startups, or what we call early stagers, the companies that have proven a point or have technology or have a new product and they need a new round of capital in order to expand. The data tells you that less than 30% of all loan applications from small businesses are approved. I hear from people constantly, can't be. Why? Well, because the SBA is going to guarantee 75% of the loan. Big whoopee. The bank doesn't care. Banks want more than a 75% guarantee. If you wanted to borrow it, for an example, of $100, you would think if SBA will guarantee 75, I only need to put up 25. The bank will ask that you put up 50 because they want to be collateralized up and above and beyond. Are they mean-spirited institutions? No. The controller of the currency doesn't want another breakdown as we had a few years ago, and so they look at loans to see how much security there is. If they don't like it, if you're leveraged, if you will, to the full 100%, they'll force a bank to write that loan off. In plain English, a bank doesn't want to give you a loan for $75 if it has to absorb that on its books for reporting purposes as a loss, even though payments are being made on that loan. So now you begin to understand why that's so few. 10% of requests that go to angel financiers make the cut, and 1% of subscription agreements to venture capitalists get funded. We have a track record. This is our arena of creating what I used to call damn good business plans. By damn good business plans, we could also call them dynamic business plans. A dynamic business plan is one that helps you raise the capital. Normally, most people who come to us are looking for money, and we always say that's great. A damn good business plan also should be a management tool. It should help you maintain the successful level that you've told everyone you want to have. Well, what's the difference between getting funded, being well managed, and not getting funded or being well managed? Everyone who wants to be an entrepreneur goes on the internet. It's marvelous. We can do wonderful research. And we're told you have to be strategic to be successful. And yes, it is true. You have to have a vision. You have to have a dream. You have to have a commitment. But the reality is that literally the second after you announce to a bank or to an investor how strategic you are, it just becomes a given. It's kind of like you see a sidewalk, you know what it's for. So telling someone I will be dedicated, I will dream, I will increase my earnings 25% a year, I'll kiss every customer on the lips. Have you ever heard someone come in and say we're going to give a lousy product, we don't intend to grow, and we're going to be nasty to every customer we've got? So being strategic, yes, it's vital, but after you say it, after you lay out what your dream is, it's just a given. You see a sidewalk, you know what it's for. before someone will give you money, whether as an investment or in terms of a loan, they want to see how tactical you are. How are you going to accomplish the company's mission? Is it realistic that it can be accomplished? Easy example of realistic. Suppose I'm an inventor, and I really have invented something. It's new, it's wonderful, and I want to apply it in the medical field, which is a hot area today. It also is so unique and special that it could be applied in 20 other different areas. If an investor sees that you've developed a business plan where you're going to go into 20 markets, they're not going to give you a dime. Why? It's not reasonable. If you haven't run a 20-person company, how are you going to run a 2,000-person company? If you haven't run a place in Fairfax County, how are you going to run one that has businesses in all the countries of the world? So tactical begins to make a distinction. The next little factor is reactive versus proactive. Sometimes when I do a PowerPoint, I didn't do that today on purpose. I thought we were so small that we could kind of sit around and talk together a little bit better than almost the professorial role. I'll flash up a picture of a telephone and say to the audience, how important is it that you answer the telephone? Now, literally everybody will always say, oh, it's very important, and then I'll put up a picture of an old-fashioned answering machine and say, it can't be but so important, or that machine couldn't do it. What's important is what you're going to say over the phone after you answer it, not that you grab it and say hello. So people look to a business plan to see that you can manage, that you have thought out all the possible problems that could occur, because there's no such thing as a perfect day or a perfect business. There will be issues and problems, and if you have taken the time to think out as many issues as humanly possible, even though the new one was never thought of, you have something comparable. You have a measuring stick to be proactive. You don't want to wait. You don't want to just grab the phone. That's reactive. You want to say something once you're on the phone. Additionally, we've learned that stories sell. Typically, we'll get a client in who may be starting a company or even have been in business for 40 years. And they will sit down and try to tell you everything in 28 seconds. And you understand nothing then, because other than they're very excited about what it is they do and that they understand what they do, but nobody else in this world is going to. Stories sell. If you're developing a paragraph, it has to have a first sentence before it can have a last sentence. So what we attempt to do is get people through a process. Frequently we talk about when people talk to themselves, it's left lobe, right lobe at synaptic speed, and that is like going up a step ladder with a missing rung or two. You can get up, but coming down is very exciting, so that you want to think out your process and develop it in a story that someone else who has never heard of you before knows who you are and what it is you want to do and how you're going to accomplish that. If you're developing a damn good business plan, the first thing anyone wants to know, and you should know for yourself, is what is the opportunity for your product or service? It's not good enough, for example, if you've been in business a number of years to say, well, we've been in business for 10 years, so there's got to be a business opportunity. I laugh and joke and say that must be exactly what buggy whip manufacturers said to their bankers many years ago. It's great that you have been in business. It's great that you've worked at a particular profession. It's great to have credentials. Look at me, I'd rather have credentials than not have them. But again, that's almost like being strategic. The minute I say it, It's all over. What am I going to do with that? So we have to define in a catchment area. That's the area in which you are going to find your customers, your clientele. It can be as small as a big city block to the world. But people want to know that you have analyzed and taken the time to figure out how much potential money is there in that product or service. If you state that in English that is understandable, simple, there's the sidewalk example again, then they believe you. Now that you've established there is an opportunity, the question becomes, can you take advantage of it? Do you have the team? Even if the team is just you, explain to someone why your credentials through experience directly within this product or management experience or education, why are you going to be able to take advantage of what I call a disproportionate share of the market? When I get clients in, let's pretend that someone believes that there's a market for 100 widgets a year sold, and there are 9 other competitors. I don't want a client who's satisfied with 10. Total number of companies in that arena divided into the total sales gives an average picture. I want someone who wants to be stellar and get a disproportionate share of the market, someone who wants to not only maintain that, but grow it. So we begin to look at that team from the perspective of its capability, and we analyze that capability against the competition. Again, someone reading your business plan who's never heard of it is sure you have some competition. Who is the competition, and why are you going to beat them? Why are you going to be better than they are? It's here where you would look to, how are you going to market yourself? My world changes constantly. Business plans of today are different than business plans of 2 years ago. I often tell people, and it is the truth, that a business plan 2 years ago that got an A would get an F today because times have changed. The way banks, investors behave, the way our customers and clientele behave has been a dramatic shift even over the last 2 years, so that a good business plan has to have adapted to reality. How are you going to market? Don't use the philosophy, have money will solve problem. Don't think you're going to get a bank or anyone else to give you money when you say, well, I'll hire a marketing person or a marketing company. Really, you're going to hire them and you're not going to give them a target. You're not going to ask them how to perform specifically over what period of time, at what price, in order for you to reach your objective. You told me you were going to be strategic, but you don't know how to get there. You don't know how to be tactical. In other words, a good business plan that we develop is not an ivory tower exercise. We begin to integrate every single factor of the plan with every other factor. The stepladder will have a rung going up and coming down at every juncture. We always tell people be target specific, that just saying I'm going to network, for example, is a valueless statement. Really? Who are you going to network with? Exactly. And why? Are you looking for direct sales? Very difficult. Or are you looking to get your reputation out there among people who can make referrals to you? Different process. How much money are you going to spend doing this? In this community, you could do a networking event every 15 minutes. How much time are you going to spend? What is your purpose? And how are you applying that to get that disproportionate share of customers of the opportunity that you've proven to me exists? The third aspect of the business plan is the pro forma or econometric model. Here again, almost inevitably, I would say that 50% of the people that I meet with that will talk about their business model or economic model will think that because the math is correct, it's wonderful. An Excel spreadsheet will do all the math, division, multiplication correctly. That's not what anyone looks to. What they look to is to see if those numbers are reasonable. And how do we determine if the numbers are reasonable, believable, creditable targets with which we can actually go after and capture, tactical? How do we do that? We look to see the assumptions. And the assumptions must be built on the opportunity that you've explained to people exists and the team that you have. An easy example, if we've proven to the world now in reasonable terms that this new invention, widget, that we can actually sell 1 million of them a day, very exciting. And now when I go look at your pro forma, you say you're going to hire 1 salesperson. I know that's not reasonable. 1 person can't sell 1 million of something a day, 7 days a week. Not going to get funded then, because there is no such thing as someone with money who isn't sophisticated enough, now that you've trained them what the opportunity is, now that you've told them about the team, not to see that your assumption is silly or unfounded. Not going to give you money if you're going to try and trick me, and you must be trying to trick me because you've just educated me now, and then much like the circus act have said, where's the P? When we talk about all of these parts, we're talking about credibility. Credibility for someone who might give you money or lend you money, and credibility for yourself as a manager, not just the wishful thinking, the drive. I hear from people all the time, particularly when they're looking for investors. Well, I don't want to give this much of my company away because I had the idea. Okay, folks, you want a great idea? I'm going to give you one right now. I have a car that works like an accordion. It can seat either 2 people or 8 people. It will go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4 seconds. It will get 100 miles per gallon, and it will sell for $10. That's a hell of an idea. The point is your idea marketable? Is it realistic? I'm going to look at what have you done with your business plan, not with your heart. The way I describe that, all entrepreneurs have faith. It's like religious zeal. You have to believe in what you're doing. Investors and banks are agnostics. They don't believe in anything but a return on investment. And if you want to be successful, it's great that you're getting psychological income. You better be cold-hearted just as well. Because while it's fun, you have to pay the rent. You have to pay your own mortgage or rent. You have to put gas in your car. So everything has to be bolted down. It can't be gauzy and dreamy. We often talk, okay, we've created that great business plan. Then how do we pitch for it? I don't know why, but this is the common denominator of entrepreneurs. You can get them to work to create a business plan, and there it is. It is my famous damn good business plan. And then I will ask them, well, tell me what would you say to people? Now we've worked at all of this, nothing is written down. They will go right back to the faith part. If I just get somebody in a room, I'm going to tell them how wonderful the widget is. Why? You worked on a business plan? Follow it. That's what you know will work. So we tell people that. We also tell them you have to engage in what is now called bank speak 21st century. Just a few years ago, I could go into a bank and say, you know me. I've lived here, you knew my parents, or you knew this, or I've got a great reputation. You should give me the money because I'm honest. It's not going to get you funded even if the banker in front of you is your best friend. They're going to talk about debt to equity ratios. They're going to talk about valuation of your company. They're going to talk about how are you going to repay me the money. That it's nice, clearly, if you walked in and said, previously I was a serial murderer, you probably aren't going to get funded. But being realistic, of course, we all want to be considered honorable and trustworthy. So that's a given, much like strategic again. As soon as I say, I've been a part of the community and I contributed and I'm in my church or I'm work for a foundation or I do all these things, as soon as I've said them, they become valueless. So we've got to talk about bank speak. We've got to talk about, here's why you want my business. That I not only have a great idea, I not only have put sweat equity into it, but this is its opportunity, and here are the good things that are going to happen to you, called a return on investment. Finally, in the little outline that we had before I open it up to questions, we talk about finding the money. Remember I said just a little bit ago that doing business plans just in the last 2 years has changed? Well, the way we go about finding capital has changed. First, you have to be in the right arena, and the right arena can shift. I've gone to banks with real estate deals in 1 week, and they've said, we've got too much real estate on our books. We're just not interested in that kind of deal. And 3 weeks later, some of the same bankers say, have you got a deal in this area? Because their portfolio has changed. So if any of you have ever taken a sales course, the first thing they tell you is don't waste time on someone who isn't going to buy your product. Don't waste time with a bank that is not interested in what you have to offer because it's not consistent with their existing portfolio management. If you're looking for angel financiers or venture capitalists, then the exact same thing. We've become the age of specialists. And I'll hear people say, well, I went on the website and it says they're interested in my kind of project. Well, first, they could have been too lazy to change the website. They have money. They don't have to change their website. People come to them. Second, because of the bad economy, most venture capitalists, angel financiers have narrowed the scope of projects that they would be interested in. They've become more and more experts themselves. But they're always willing to look and just see if that 1 in a million case flops into their lap. Don't try to be the 1 in a million. Your odds are 1,000,000 to 1. Terrible, terrible odds. So you are looking for someone or some organization that is predisposed to have an interest in you. All of these organizations, you think banks are competitive? Not really. You think angel financiers are competitive? Not at all. Venture capitalists? No. Well, what does that mean? That means just a little integrity. Just how about asking someone, I need some help here. If I were to come forward and the project has merit, would you be interested in this kind of project? Most people will tell you, no, I'm not because of the following reasons. That's fine. Who do you know that is? They will know someone that would be interested in that kind of project, and what you're asking for is a warm introduction. All of us have gotten a referral from someone who hands us a B&I pink slip and says, call John. What are the statistics of calling John and it turning into something? You still do it. They're very, very low. But if that person says, hey, are you available tomorrow? I'm going to introduce you to John at lunch, or Susie, or Helen. A warm introduction is worth much more because we've advanced ourselves dramatically and we can start a dialogue. So who are we? We're the values group. What do? We try to help people, and we seem to be pretty good at it in developing business plans. Ah, you always save me.
I have questions about the technique, Larry. So when you're working with a business owner, build up a nice business plan, there's probably some technical terms in there. There's probably some information that they're not comfortable saying and using those words when they're in front of the bank. do you help the owner to kind of exercise it, work it out, like talk to you or just role playing, so that they can be comfortable doing that? Do you walk through that process with them?
We go through that process. First of all, no one in the whole world is an expert at everything. So that we use our clients as subject matter experts, and that's why we can be doing such an array of projects at any one time. And those projects can be my famous Fairfax County or the world, so that we're not limited. And you begin, I had said that the difference with us is the process. It's a give and take, interactive is the word of today. You would be stunned at some of the things that people will email me. And of course, it is now an email record in the world of litigation. And I won't even use the phone to communicate with them. I'll go see them and say, you sent me this email. Could you not use that language again? Because I knew what you were talking about, but my famous stranger, if they were to see that, if a law firm doing due diligence saw that language, though you didn't realize it, you will have triggered 50 crises within a law firm, and it has nothing to do with what you really meant. So could we stick to answering the questions that I asked you, and then we'll talk about bank speak and what you say. It can even be the funny. We took a client recently that had been turned down by 8 banks. He clearly didn't understand bank speak, and he would go into meetings with this much documentation to prove that he was an honest guy, and if only the bank could look at all those things. Well, your banker isn't going to do that. Maybe a risk analyst would look at it, but they can't. No one could keep that story. I said to him, unless you're sitting there on the pile of papers when someone goes to look at this and tell them how to marshal going back and forth, they're really not going to understand what you're talking about. And that's why I want to junk everything you've said, and let's tell it the story that they'll comprehend. So yes, we work with people.
So having said that you do work with people and develop this whole process, what is your general expectation initially? What do you like to see a client come in with so that you have sort of the raw materials to help it?
People go to the internet and tend to think that if they can download a template, they can do a business plan. If you just fill in the blanks, a business plan is more like original art than painting by the numbers. And so I get people that I'm about to meet for the first time ask me, what should I bring? And I always say, yourself. That I don't want anything other than a free flow of conversation for a couple of hours so that I can begin to understand what this project is going to be about, can tell them how long I think it'll take and why, can talk about responsibilities. Because honestly, if we don't do the work, we don't charge for it. So we try, some clients take the position that they're simply too busy. It isn't they couldn't do X, Y, or Z. They'd rather pay for someone. Others say, hey, I can do that. I need to hold down my cost. And we try to accommodate that. So the first thing that I would ask them, if they've ever done any research in the area or data, they may be a government contractor, for example, and they really have some significant data that would take me a very long time to find. For example, if they're making proposals and we're trying to get money, we want to expand, they want to become a prime contractor, there's something in that, and let's suppose that they're winning 1 out of 3 of every proposals, which is, believe me, Hall of Fame numbers, and it is possible, then I would say to them, okay, how do you know? What is the norm closing ratio here? They may have done that research and had that data in the development of their proposal department or the business development group, and it isn't that we couldn't find it. But if you've got it, why don't you just give it to me? And if we're going to go, in that case, to obtain funds, the first thing I would say is, okay, you who've done this, can you disclose the names of these contracts? Is there something that you've done with the government, maybe where you cannot divulge you've got that contract? What if it was a sole source? I raise that because I have to know, do we need to work around this? Is there some way of disclosing which is legally appropriate and fair, or are we just really going to be hurt here? So what information do you have? What job descriptions have you written? I frequently run across the head of companies who will say, I'm too busy to write that job description. Well, really? Yet you've told me the last 14 people in that job haven't done what you asked them. How much time did it cost you to interview and interview and interview and to tell HR to do this, to do that? Why the hell didn't you do it? It isn't working. Let's get it done right. Now we'll have a free flow of communication. So it may be that when you say things, it may well be that I give a CEO some jobs. And ultimately, people like working with us. They begin to have fun, and you can see the progress. It is incremental. We don't go into a phone booth and come out as Superman. That's not realistic. Anything that's worthwhile, everybody in this room knows this, is hard work.
Starting the project and ongoing, I'm sure there's various types of pieces.
If we're doing a classic business plan, classic meaning the things that I'd be willing to bet are going to be thrown in our path, if they run anywhere from $5,000 to $35,000. If you're coming in and telling me the business plan that we're developing is going to go into a private placement memorandum, and that by virtue of what we're doing, you're going to cut your legal bills, it's just more hours for us to work. Can it go lower than that? Yes. We can work with people. I've had a couple of companies that were really successful companies, so it had nothing to do with money, say, we want to do this ourselves. We want to use your model. Will you mentor us? And we will mentor people. We will look at it and review it, and honestly, I shouldn't say this, it's the easiest money in the whole world. I get to read what you wrote and pontificate and tell you what you did wrong or right, and I don't see you again for another month until you've come back and done it again. So we have helped some small companies. We attempt as a unit to give back to society, so that where we find that there's someone that if they just were to get that helping hand at a magic moment, it would be life-changing. We try to be that life changer. Sometimes we can't. Did I ask? I mean, we will put a ceiling on any project that we do. We will tell people, if it goes over that, if you're in and you haven't changed our assignments, you haven't asked us to take on new things, that this is the max.
And your success rate is, when you take a class, that you always find funding for them usually? Is that the case, or how does that work?
I'm going to sound, George Mason University holds a breakfast every quarter. They used to call it the grub steak breakfast. What's the new name of that? I keep forgetting it. And what they do is they say that anyone who gets selected to make a presentation within 6 months gets funded. What they're not saying that buy someone in that room. They're saying that the process and doing this will put you in position that you will find someone. So, for example, we did a business plan for a bakery a few years ago, and they did not get funded at the time, but 16 months later they did. The reason they didn't, and this broke my heart, by the way, is they did what I would call the old-fashioned way. The old-fashioned way is a group of us would get together and start a business, and we wouldn't take anything out of it, literally, just enough to survive, because we would keep the profits in solution, buying more inventory, more space, whatever it is in order to grow. And at one time, that was considered a terribly honorable business model. Today, if you do that, you will never, ever, ever get a loan out of a bank. I don't care about SBA, because they'll look around and say, well, you're only earning 32 cents a year, and you're a bad risk. You're just above the poverty level, or you're in the poverty level, and you're sitting there saying, but my business grew 28% a year, which was his particular case, for 4 solid years compounded. And no matter what we had to say, they kept saying, but your income is so low. So what we did is switch tack for a year, boost his income, and then, yeah, I know, silly. And then he got a loan approved because he now could say, okay, I'm no longer at poverty level. Of course, the earnings went up like that instead of like this because he wasn't plowing everything back in. So we have had cases where we thought the person ought not go into that business. It's not my job. I'm not a judge. We met with someone for lunch, and they said, I don't want you to persuade me not to go into this business. Well, that tells me that he knew it wasn't a great idea. And I said to him, that's not my job. It's not my job to tell you to quit your existing job and throw everything into a new business. It's not my job. What I can tell you is that I am not capable of developing a business plan that will demonstrate this will be profitable. And when that occurs, it is a big signal that you perhaps should not be doing it. We have had that occur for a couple of franchises where the people had purchased a franchise and it wasn't working. And in one case, happily, they still had money. They were throwing good money after bad, really. And so the conclusion, no matter what we did, was I said, you ought to go out and get a job. And he says, that's a terrible idea. Go out and get a job and work for this amount of money, that I'm worth more than that. I said, really? For 3 years, you haven't been worth a damn dime. You haven't been paid. So being over here is disgraceful. I would think being a bum is disgraceful. You're a bum if you haven't earned anything in 3 years, unless you're really rich. You're not really rich. You just saved up some money and were able to go into this, and you're going to be depleted of capital soon. And then you will be working over here anyway. Do it now while you've still got some money. Come up with another idea. So we try, if that's the story, to say where we are as quickly as possible. It's not judgmental. It would be wrong for me to take somebody's money if I didn't believe they were going to be successful. And yes, we turned down 50% of all clients who would hire us because we determined that we don't think they can make it, that there's just something they've told us about themselves. It doesn't mean I think they aren't nice people or wonderful, but they've said something that would trigger within us that they're not going to throw the hours into this that's required. They've told us something about that no matter what they said, they weren't listening to themselves. That great idea, but there's not enough volume in the product. Even if I do the research, I know that there are not enough. If you tell me you're going to have a storefront, I know from experience you have to have traffic into your storefront. It's a different operation than if you have an internet business. We have a different set of rules to look at things. But the minute you say, I want a store, I got to ask, well, And if they say, well, in the whole metro area, there are this many people like me, so that's great. That's wonderful. Somebody from Rockville, Maryland is going to get in their car, fight through Tyson's Corner, come down here, spend 2 hours getting here to buy a $5.95 item. Haha, really? Well, they could call us. They could. Is that what you do when you go? Or you go to the store to buy it? You want to see it. You want to smell it. You want to lick it, bite it, touch it. So when we get those kinds of signals, then we will say, we're not the right people for you. We have even referred people to coaches where we've said, you know, you need to have a different mindset, and you need to work with this person with no business to see whether that can become your aptitude. We've turned people down again. We're not arrogant. We just don't think we'll be able to work with them. They won't listen to what it is we have to say, and I don't want to take their money. The reality is, if you take money from somebody you know is going to hate you in 6 months, they're going to hate you in 6 months, and that isn't your best referral.
Question. Being a banker, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is that I think many people misunderstand that banks are analyzing risk and they're making types of decisions, and it's not emotional. It's really analyzing risk based on finite or the facts. And I find it remarkable that in many cases it's like pulling teeth, getting the information really that we need to make that decision. I mean, everything from filling out a personal financial statement. We ask for 3 years of tax returns. You give us one. I mean, and people wonder why sometimes the underwriting process takes so long. Well, I think it can be very frustrating on the banker's side. There's an opinion of how much information they think we need and how much information we really need to make that decision, and that can make the biggest difference in the world. And the information can be there. You could be, and a lot of times we will decline somebody because we don't have all the information. And while in reality they could be perfectly eligible for that loan. So I think there's often that disconnect. I mean, in writing your business plans, you speak to, and you talk about bank speak, but I think it would make a big difference if you already speak to that. I think that would be great, but I think there's often a disconnect there.
I ran companies before I created the Values Group, and we sold out a little more than 5 years ago, and I started this because I had done business plans as an entrepreneur, and my boards seemed to like the way I put them together, and lending institutions tended to shower us with money because they really understood what it was we were going to do, when, why, and exactly how it was to be done, and we provided benchmarks. The way I got there was simply utilizing what I call wisdom. As you know, all banks really have same due diligence lists. We may list the requirements numerically, we may list them alphabetically, we may use a combination, but the required information in order to make a decision by the bank is in a due diligence list. We just simply built that into the business plan so that when the bank gets this, they got everything because, as you said, we know if you don't have 3 years of tax returns, they're just not going to do it, was a perfect example. And would you please sign their credit application? Would you just do that? They won't be so mean-spirited that you have to fill out every line on your net worth if you've got a perfect net worth, but you've got to sign that damn thing. If you don't do it, they don't have the required information to proceed. I understand now that has become more and more of an issue for the banks. From my perspective, the client we were talking about went for $5 million, had been turned down by 8 banks. We introduced him to 4 banks. He had 1 holdover, and we had another alternative source, and 4 of the 6 made proposals. And in that case, he went wild. Each institution wanted their own exact form. So it was just kind of fun.
So how did you turn that? I mean, how did you go from being declined by 8 to being approved by 4?
The difference? Well, the first thing is that I asked this particular client, okay, what is your business opportunity? And his response was, been in business 42 years, there is an opportunity. That's the wrong answer. A bank lends you money, they want to know that opportunity exists reasonably well for the next 30 years or 25 or 20 or whatever it is. So though he had been in business successfully, he had never defined what the potential opportunity was for him on an annualized basis. So the first thing we were able to do was to demonstrate to the bank that there was more business available than he could possibly, if he stayed open 24/7, capture. So that we also could demonstrate based on historical data, which he tried to verbalize in these meetings but couldn't seem to get it across, was that each time he took dollars, either from earnings or borrowings, and improved his facility, this was a wedding events planner, that the price per person went up and that his net profit increased exponentially. Because if for example, you're going to do a wedding and you want steak dinner, the steak is the same whether the event planner charges you $50 or $80. The steak doesn't get more expensive because there's a charge. The chef that I have doesn't get paid more because the people were paid more. The utility, the electric company, doesn't get to charge you more because this event was more expensive in terms of a total cost, so that we could go back now and track and show every single improvement that he had made and the consequent increase in price. We could go back and explain that how he had done his books, for example, were all legal. That wasn't an issue. He had a CPA. They had a choice between amortizing and deducting certain expenses. They deducted it, and we showed how that could be plowed back and EBITDA would be increased. We then could show the debt to equity ratio. So, and then finally, we could show now that we had the market opportunity as consultants, we could demonstrate to this client how he was misdirecting his very capable marketing consultant who was using a high-tech system through the internet and attempting to capture through social media. For example, in a wedding event planner, we in developing his opportunity, we could discount for those people who had to have a wedding in a hotel. We could discount for those people who wanted a more luxurious setting. We could discount for those people who couldn't afford to pay him, so that we could show a base, and then we could say to the marketeer side, look, he gave you the wrong instructions. He had the idea that if he could get more hits on his website, more hits would generate more possible clients. What we could show him, the marketeer, and the bank was, no. What you want to do is generate more people who are predisposed to use your services. What that does is cut down on your expenses, because now you're not asking people in. They're doing demos all the time. Try our crab cakes, try our wedding cake, what have you. You're feeding a lot of people who aren't going to buy your service. Don't. That's expensive. Second of all, you don't need a larger staff, marketing staff. You're forcing them to interact with people who aren't going to buy your service. Reduce the number of people coming to them. Aha, you increase the ratio of sales, so that we were able to show the bank not only how this would work, but it was working, because we started making changes immediately, and we could pinpoint and say, to this point, this was the way we operated. Now we've changed it, and look what's happened. Our closing ratio is going up. We're going to use your money to improve the facilities even more based on past history, proven database. Here it is. You can see it for yourself. No secrets. our profits will go up to here, so that the pro forma and the projection all sang together. And so instead of negative attitude, plus he wasn't walking in with all of this massive amount of documents. That, I mean, he had all of his construction. Every time he had spent $1 on a nail, he was asking the bank to go look at that. It's nice for them to have it, and they certainly may ultimately have someone else go through it, but can you imagine my coming in and throwing something that weighs 52 pounds on your desk and saying to you, if you will just read this and understand it, you will know I'm a hell of a deal. Right. I didn't even do it. He asked me to read it. I said, are you crazy?